Fear Not, Episode 114. Hi, I'm Billy Atwell, and I believe that consistently facing your fears is the only way to realize your truest self and to make those confident choices that will help you to obtain your deepest held hopes and dreams. I have faith that this podcast series will show you that you are not alone, that it will strengthen you and give you courage to face your fears, and that it will help you to permanently cross over into a life of living beyond your fears. Join me on this journey as we listen and learn from others as they share their experiences in facing and overcoming their own fears. Hello, everyone. Today, you and I are going to be joined by Carla Cneggars. Hello, Carla. How are you today?
Doing great, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Are you ready to fear not today?
I am.
Carla is the New York Times bestselling author of more than 60 novels, including her popular Sharp and Donovan and Swift River Valley series. Her books have been translated into 24 languages and sold in over 35 countries. Whether creating stories of friendship, family and love, or razor-sharp suspense, Carla always takes readers on a captivating journey. Her books have been called smart and satisfying, extraordinarily memorable, and highly entertaining, and she's been praised for her unerring knack of creating compelling, sympathetic characters and vivid, realistic settings. Carla, can you take a few extra moments to fill in the gaps and maybe also give us a brief glimpse of your personal life?
Oh, sure. Well, I'm speaking to you from our hilltop house in Vermont, and I'm just back from a little personal writing retreat in Ireland. I like to get away sometimes to write, and so I was working on a book called Thief's Mark, which is an upcoming Sharp and Donovan novel. So it's a suspense novel, and I just kind of walked and ran and wrote in Ireland and ate some really good food. So and I have a husband and 2 adult children and 3 little grandchildren.
Carla, would you also share with us today one of the biggest fears that you've had to face?
Sure. I thought about this hard because I would say, I have my professional fears and then there's personal fears. We got our fears. But there's one that stands out, and I really want to be honest about what this is. And my daughter and her then 3-year-old son were about a half a block from the second Boston Marathon bomb. And it was an absolutely harrowing experience, and they got out of it. They did fine. But I was afraid of what that experience would do to us as a family and to this little boy. It really got to me that I didn't want this to be one of his earliest memories. And I just was so afraid. I think of my earliest memories, and believe me, they're not of bombs going off. And I just didn't want that to be. I was afraid of what it would do to him. I was afraid of what it said about the world we live in. And I was afraid, he has a little baby sister at them, and so the 2 of them, and then we now have a third one. What about their safety? What are we dealing with here? And so that was a real fear that developed out of this situation, which was harrowing, but they did get out safely.
So what did you do to handle that?
Well, I did 2 things. One of the most important things for me was that I'm a fixer. I'm a doer. I like to, roll up my sleeves and get in there. And I had to acknowledge how I felt and kind of drill down I'm trying to fix something that can't be fixed. I mean, somebody's memory is going to be somebody's memory. The situation is what the situation was. But so it's like I just had to acknowledge how I felt without fighting it or minimizing it or hyperbolizing it. And I noticed, during this experience, when I was trying to figure this out, and I would talk to people, and the natural thing for a lot of people to do is to minimize, to try to say, well, like, all right, everything's fine because they're fine, So, and that's true, but at the same time, you're sitting there thinking, yes, but I don't want him to have experienced this. I don't want it to be something that this little boy, he was just a month shy of his 4th birthday, would have to cope with, to remember. And I didn't know during that time how it would be. I mean, now we're 4 years into it, and I have a good sense of, how he's processed everything. But when I was in the midst of it, I was in full mama bear mode, and then I had my daughter too, and her experience. And so for me, just kind of settling all that fight and flight and minimizing and hyperbolizing and just being with it and not trying to fix it and just acknowledging, yes, this has happened, this is how I feel about it, and just not doing anything with it. That was very important to me. And then the second thing, I did say I'm a doer, so I started running. And my daughter, she was already a runner. That's why they were at the marathon watching a charity runner, a friend of theirs that's why they were still one of the viewers, because the charity runners were some of the later people coming in, and he didn't get to finish the race. And so she was already someone who, she hasn't run a marathon, but she'd run several half marathons. So we signed up for a half marathon here in Vermont, and we ran on behalf of a charity that helps children, and we're doing it again this June. And understand that I'm a hiker, very active and all of that, but running, not so much. I started out training, I could run a minute. I had a program. It takes you in 8 weeks, takes you from running a minute to running 30 minutes. And they say if you can run 30 minutes, you can run any distance. That might be a little bit much, but still, it worked for me. I started out at running for a minute, and I ran a half marathon. That was in January, and I ran a half marathon in early June with my daughter. So that was very empowering for me. And through that experience of just, running, and you're thinking a lot when you're running, and you just try to be fully present with what you're doing, and your mind can wander off and yet come back. And so that helped me to reframe this experience. And I began to think about, like what we experienced. Yes, it was harrowing to go through the, everything that went on. She grabbed the child out of his stroller. She abandoned the stroller. She had to get the stroller back. They ran 3 miles to meet up with her husband and the baby. Cell phones went out. We were in the midst of the aftermath, and they live very close to where the the bombers were eventually captured and killed. And so all of that stuff was there, and it did happen, and we did experience it, and all of that. But in reframing, I thought about, we also experienced a tremendous amount of support and community caring, and just knowing that it was not, that was an out-of-control, chaotic experience in some ways, and in other ways, like one of the things my daughter remembers and I think about is the police officer who ran toward the bomb as she's taken off, and the lines of ambulances, and then an image of, like, my little guy, what he one of the things he can remember is the care dogs. We went to the scene after, it was about a week later, and there were these care dogs, and you could just pet these dogs, and just that those resources are available. I mean, there were so many things that, I write suspense, and and I've interviewed many, many, many kinds of police officers, detectives, judges, first responders of all kinds. Did a lot with search and rescue research, and so for me to just be in the midst of this and see other resources that are available. So there's that reframing. So for me, it was acknowledging, it was starting to run and signing up for my first half marathon, and then through that, reframing this experience. And so it's nothing I would want to go through again, but at the same time, there's things I know about myself and about us as a family and about our community in all its aspects: mental health, first responders, the investigators, just so many, the survivors, just so many people involved in this experience that I wouldn't have known otherwise.
Carla, have you come across any books or other resources that have helped you face your fears in general that you might be able to share with us today?
Well, one of the things that I also was meditation, and I love the resource. It's an app called Headspace, and it's a great one to learn how to meditate. So I really highly recommend Headspace.
Are you ready for the speed run?
Yes.
What individual, whether they're fiction or real, has made the most impact on your life?
Oh, I would have to say my father. He's no longer with us, but he was a Dutch immigrant, and he was just quite a can-do guy. He was a great influence.
If you could instantly change one thing in the world, what would you change?
I know I'm supposed to say like a disease or world peace or something, and I really believe in those. But you know what? I just got back from Ireland, and it's 5-hour time difference, and I would draw that little map and make it 3 hours time difference. I think that would be a great change. I'm just kidding.
What's your biggest weakness?
My biggest weakness? Oh, I can obsess. I can really obsess.
What's your biggest strength?
I can get things done.
If you could only have one book to read, what book would that be?
Oh, you're talking to a writer and you ask about one book. Oh my gosh. I guess I'm going to cheat and say it would be the one I'm writing, because I could always be writing a new book. So I wouldn't be restricted to one book.
Do you have a favorite sound?
I do. I love ocean sounds.
And Carla, if someone would like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
My website, cneggars.com.
And do you have any parting advice that you would like to leave with us today?
Parting advice. I hate giving advice, but I think the most important thing is for me in describing the fear that I experienced is the acknowledging and then moving towards reframing. I don't think you can reframe without acknowledging.
Sounds like excellent advice, and thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to thank you for sharing your story and taking the time to talk to us today about fear and helping us with our own fears. So thank you so much.
All right, my pleasure. Great talking with you.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you cannot achieve everything, but you do have the God-given ability to achieve anything. So stay focused, out of fear, and keep on keeping on. Until next time, be well and peaceful. For more information on today's episode and guest, or for resources that will assist you in overcoming your fears, visit livingbeyondyourfears.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, where 3 times a week we move to a life beyond our fears.